Hi, this is Neil from Growlies. I'm here with Dr. John Robb. Dr. Robb is, you may know from his internet fame, where he's been fighting for the right for us to protect our pets from inappropriate use of vaccinations, as well as some of the, what would we say, large corporate interests affecting the veterinary advice that we're being given. And so today I wanted to start out just by saying this is not an anti-vaccination talk. This is a talk about responsible vaccination. And so that we get the whole, this is a anti-vaxxer talk. In no way is that what we're doing today. I just wanted to make that clear to everybody from the get-go. And then I'm gonna read something that I found on Dr. Robb's protectthepets.com website, and it's the veterinarian's oath. And I believe you have to say this oath, much like a doctor would take the Hippocratic oath when caring for humans. The vets say this as part of them becoming a veterinarian. Is that correct, Dr. Robb?
Yeah, that's correct. Before we graduate, or right at the time of graduation, we recite the oath.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to read that oath, and then that oath is ultimately where the values that guide Dr. Robb are coming from, as well as his own personal values, and from those which he gets from his community. And so the veterinarian's oath, and I'm going to read this, so I'm not looking directly at the camera. I'm not well trained at this stuff. The veterinarian's oath: being admitted to the profession of veterinary medicine, I solemnly swear to use my scientific knowledge and skills for the benefit of animal health and welfare, the prevention and relief of animal suffering, the conservation of animal resources, the promotion of public health, and the advancement of medical knowledge. I will practice my profession conscientiously, with dignity, and in keeping with the principles of veterinary medical ethics. I accept as a lifelong obligation the continual improvement of my professional knowledge and competence. And that is the guiding principles that lead to this conversation.
Well stated.
Well, you know, I couldn't say it any better than you do, Dr. Robb. So I want to say, firstly, the first time I heard of you was you were in front of a large board, a very official looking, I'd say it was, and I'm not sure who the board was. I'm not sure if it was a state or federal board around, and you were talking about responsible vaccinations and how the industry that guides the recommendations for veterinarians states that you have to give the same amount of vaccine, and for instance, we can use a rabies vaccine to a Great Dane as you would to a 7-pound Chihuahua. Is that correct?
Well, what it says is that, you know, according to the law, the rabies law, that we must follow the manufacturer's recommendations. And since they've done those research in terms of the size of the pet and the volume, they just say, give everybody 1 cc. And, you know, with the science as part of the oath, and we'll get into that, we're supposed to keep up with the latest science, which clearly shows when we do that, we are over-vaccinating the small dogs and oftentimes putting them into anaphylactic shock.
Right, because these things we put into their immune systems, they do a lot. They're not, it's just not some innocuous, it's not an aspirin we're talking about here.
Well, exactly. You know, Dr. Schultz probably stated it best. He said, you know, when you take a pharmaceutical drug, you affect, you know, your GI tract, or, you know, but when you have a vaccine, that affects your immune system, and your immune system affects every system in your body. So this is much more serious than just an aspirin or an amoxicillin tablet, you know?
Right. And so what were you in that board? And I recommend people go and look up Dr. John Robb, do a search. I believe it's actually on the Protect the Pets website. Am I correct?
Yeah, that was, I believe that was when I was in front of the public health department in the state of Connecticut a few years back, giving testimony in support of amending the rabies law to allow veterinarians to one, choose the volume, and secondly, to do the titer test, the blood test that shows circulating antibodies, which is the only way to prove that the vaccine actually worked and produced immunity. and then not to revaccinate a pet unless their titer wanes, because my whole thing here is if they're already immune to rabies, giving them another rabies vaccine has no medical benefit, but in fact can potentially harm them. In some cases, actually, they die. So to me, that's malpractice. So I call this the current rabies laws. It's mandated malpractice. So veterinarians are in bondage to this system, but we're also the ones who should be knowledgeable and take the steps forward to change it.
And you're fighting big lobby. There's a large lobby from both the veterinary community, where they're let's say some of the chains might be fighting or lobbying to keep that going, because ultimately they profit from giving the every 3-year rabies shot rather than doing a less expensive titer.
Exactly, and the thing of it is you got PetSmarts, Petco's, you got Walmart getting in. Not Walmart. Yeah, Walmart is getting in it too. You've got so many stores just going to promote. It's kind of like, the CVS where I'll give you a free flu shot. It's just going nuts, and these are not necessary, and they're actually deleterious. So it is really a mess out there right now. But the good news, believe it or not, just today, Neil, this is really important. This is like George Washington crossing the Delaware. So this is hot news for you, okay? The AVMA, the American Veterinary Medical Association, interviewed me, okay? Now, they're the ones that are not taking the steps that they should, and they interviewed me not because they wanted to. In these many years that I've been beloved by pet owners, because I'm standing up for the rights of their pets and the right to live and to get good veterinary care, because of the pharmaceutical influence and the corporation influence in the veterinary schools on through the curriculum. And then, of course, in, my association, they don't want anything to do with me, and they just want to pretend I don't exist. But the reason they've come to me now and said, we want to talk to you, is they want me to answer the question, why are people not vaccinating their pets? And they had to ask the question because the pet owners are taking over. The public, they are becoming educated, and with that education, they're walking in there saying, no, I want a titer. And so this is really a big thing, because it's going to be probably, she said, in the March Journal, and this is the big American Veterinary Medical Association. So this is hitting mainstream. I don't know what they're going to write. I gave a lot. We'll see what they actually put in there. Maybe it's going to be one sentence, and maybe it's not. We'll see. But I believe the person who was interviewing me had little knowledge and walked out of there with her head spinning. So it was a good interview. But so we're getting there, Neil, is what I'm trying to say. We're winning this battle.
Every little step, right? Every
step.
Yeah, and the AVMA actually asking to speak with you for an article in the journal, that's actually huge, because it's organizations like that would have wanted to silence you for so many years.
Oh yeah, well, I was talking, to the current president when he was a representative in Massachusetts before he became the AVMA president, Doctor, and I called him because, they're going after my license. And I said, hey, I need some support here. And he said to me, you're probably right. We're overdosing the little guys, but the pharmaceutical companies have to do the research, and nobody's making them, so they're not going to. So you're fighting a losing battle. And I'm sitting there wondering, well, but what about the AVMA? Don't we veterinarians, can't we say to the pharmaceutical companies that we want responsible studies done, so that when we go in to use your products, that we're not killing our patients?
Yeah.
And we can't make them do that, because why? Well, because of the money train, because that's funding so many things. Nobody wants to make waves, you know what I'm saying? So, but it's baloney. That's why I did a recent Facebook Live. We need new leadership in the AVMA. That's what we need. So.
Yeah, we require that here at the BCVMA in my jurisdiction as well. We're governed by the BCVMA, and they lay down some rules around the fresh pet foods that don't make sense. They make rules around the regular use of vaccines without titers. We're in the same boat, even here in Canada. It's not just an American issue.
Absolutely. Well, and it's a worldwide movement. I mean, I've been involved with people in many countries trying to help their cause as best I can. Now I have my own hospital again, so I'm working 6 days a week and don't have the time I had. But you know, this movement is really, if I dropped out, it's already done because it's going to go on its own because it's not about me, it's about the truth. And once the truth is well known, then it just keeps going like a fire. And that's what's happening. And that's why we are going to win and this whole thing is coming down. And this is how standards of care change in any industry with the new standards, and then the old have to go. But people get dug in, especially when there's a lot of income coming out of the old standard.
Right. So. Right. And so for the most part, we're talking about the three big vaccinations, right? We're talking about rabies, parvo, and
distemper.
Distemper. Thank you very much.
Those are the only, to be honest with you, Neil, those are the only three that I vaccinate against or believe in vaccinating against. I say believe because they've taken my ability to give a rabies shot away. So I don't want to say I give the rabies shot because then the next thing you know, they'll pull me in front of the board again. But having said that, yeah, these are serious diseases that are well documented and cause issues and would cause issues if we didn't vaccinate against them. And they're serious. Obviously, rabies is a public health concern. People can die from it. Your pets can die from it. Your pets can give it to people. So we definitely need to vaccinate against it. Distemper, parvo, over the years have taken many lives. But that's where I stop right there. These other vaccines, I call them fluff. They have very little immunity, if any. They cause issues. They shouldn't be given. So, but those three, I believe in vaccinating. But again, smallest volume, lowest number of vaccines to produce immunity measured by a titer, and then titer year by year to make sure that pet continues to hold immunity. And by the way, this any pet that I've ever titered that's been immune to those things, I've never had one become unimmune yet. Okay, so you know, eventually it won't be every year. It's just like I suggest in Canada, you guys have been vaccinated against mumps, measles, and rubella. Certainly we have, and we don't go and get a shot every 3 years. We don't even think about it because we assume we're immune, and we are. And if you want to get a job in a hospital, they don't even ask your vaccine information. Here in the U.S., they ask for a titer to be done, and if you're got circulating antibodies, then you start work. You know, it's the same science, and it should be the same for these, and we're going to break through and get there.
So in our, and I don't know if it's true of all jurisdictions, titers seem to be 2 or 3 times the cost of the vaccination.
Well, that's simply because they haven't made it affordable. That's all I can tell you. I mean, you know, in the U.S., I know in Canada it's a big problem because we do a lot of titers for Canadians, and it's been good because we've given them, because I'm hearing $600, you know, to do.
Yeah, I've seen $500.
Yeah. So, but the key thing in the U.S. is, you know, you've got these middlemen. I call them IDEX, Antec. This are 90% of the laboratory use, and they don't do the rabies titer. They forward it to Kansas, but they had $100. They had $100 just simply to take this serum tube, put it in another box, and send it to Kansas State. And of course, vets usually double the cost, so it's at $200 and nobody's done anything yet, you know. Then add the cost. But Kansas State does offer affordable titering, and vets can join Kansas State in the U.S. and their charges will be $32 for distemper parvo and about the same for rabies. So that's their cost. So they could, you know, be doing titers for under $100, and that's what I'm doing in the movement. I started doing it at cost just because it was ridiculous, and then, you know, now I make $20. I just add $20, but we're able to really and it's pushing the movement because you see people are walking in and saying, listen, I want you to draw the blood for me and just give me the serum because you want $500 and Dr. Robb will do it for $80. So charge me $30, give me the serum, and then I'll send them a UPS label in the submission form, and we get the titers done. So I would be happy to give up that income and work, and vets who really want to help people will just join Kansas State and do it. I mean, it's online. You submit your information, boom, boom, email, UPS, and submission form, and out it goes to the next UPS carrier. It's so simple, and then you can make it affordable. So it's not being made affordable because a lot of vets, they don't want to do titers because they're going to walk in one room and say, okay, your pet doesn't need the vaccines. And they're going to walk in the other room and give shots without checking the titer. And then it becomes so obvious. And then when somebody dies, why didn't you check the titer on that one? You know?
Right. So some of the risks of vaccines. So what I see in my store, and just to give you a little background, my store, we consider ourselves a health food store, and we don't sell any kibble at all. We don't believe that. We feel that it's a broken form of feeding. It's no longer, it doesn't no longer make sense. Personally, I stopped taking nutrition advice from Nestle, 25 years ago. I think our dogs should stop taking advice from Nestle and well, Mars or chocolate bar companies or candy companies, and because that's ultimately who dominates that space.
That's true. That's true.
And so that's who we are, and so we see a lot of animals who come in and they've tried everything under the sun, and I see a lot of people who come in who have super inflamed dogs. And the two questions I ask are, did you have a flea treatment recently? Because that's a side effect of flea treatment. And then did you have a vaccine recently? Because that's a potential side effect of vaccination. Do you agree with that approach?
Yeah, I mean, look, here's what I said. And, what's interesting is, for me, what's interesting about me, and I don't quite understand it, is that I came out of the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, I was indoctrinated. I went through vet school. This is what you use. But I could clearly see with the vaccines, the issues. And so I went against it. And as I became known, then a lot of holistic veterinarians joined the movement. And I've been learning from them more about more natural treatments and about, the foods, raw feeding and some of the freeze dried where you add the meat and this kind of stuff. And like you said, moving away from the kibbles and things. So I've learned a lot because of the veterinarians that have, surrounded me that are mostly holistic. So it's an area that, yeah, I mean, there was just something, maybe you probably saw in the news where Blue Buffalo, somebody's suing them, their pet's got diabetes. And of course, we know that a lot of these kibbles, you read the ingredients and there's 65%. Well, what's the other 35%? Sugar, but it's not even listed and it doesn't have to be listed. So obviously that's going to cause issues, right? Because it's cheap and they fill those foods with it. So yes, I think the ladies in Canada as well, you might know her, Monica Siegel. Are you familiar with Monica?
Not familiar, no.
Yeah, I believe she's a Canadian and she's she's on Facebook. I think it's called Country Kitchen, but she's got a 4-year degree in dog nutrition, and I had a couple lengthy conversations with her and she would agree. She would say it like this: there may be some instances where some kibbles are acceptable, and she would also say raw feeding's not for every dog, okay? But I think just the kibble industry is obviously a big problem, because it lines the shelves and everybody thinks dogs have to eat that or they're not healthy. And of course, we know that's not true. So I'm not an expert in that area. I'm learning, but certainly when people come into me, there's a big discussion about alternative feeding. Okay.
So I think that you at one point ran a Banfield hospital, and then you later had problems with a VCA franchise that you owned. And both of those now, I believe, are owned by Mars.
Correct.
And so you ran Banfield before Mars purchased them, I assume?
Yeah, well, what happened, I bought my franchise right about the same time that they bought Banfield, 2008. Okay, so, it takes a little time for them to, so-and-so left the practice, so-and-so left the practice, so-and-so left, and then everything starts changing. So it was kind of an incredible experience in the sense that I saw it go from, one owner who, even though he have been heavy on vaccines, he gave pretty much autonomy to what we call the franchise owners. In other words, there are about 900 hospitals, about 200 were franchises. I owned one. And, as long as the income was good and there were no complaints. He let us do our thing because, you know, when you have an interest in it, you're going to do a little more. And, but when Mars bought, they didn't want franchises. They defranchised and they played hardball. If that's saying it nicely, you know, they basically threatened the franchisees that they would go after their licenses because they control the medical records. And so within 5 years, they were all gone. And many people had 15, 20 years. Some had been there 20 years and had really built up these hospitals, and they had to take pennies on the dollar and run. Of course, I didn't do that. I told them to get out. And that's why we're talking right now, because I didn't just get up and run. I said they were wrong and I was right. And I still am. And you know, this may sound bold to you, Neil, but I think they're coming down. I think we're going to kick these people out of veterinary medicine because they are only interested in profits. I know it. And as people get educated to this, they're not going to put up with it. They don't want to go into places where, you know, the recommendations are based on them making money at your pet's expense. Nobody wants that. And they have their foundations. You know how it is, Neil. They have their foundations that look good, and but all these things are just cover-ups for the fact that they sit there and, you know, push products that aren't good for pets. They have quotas that people, I mean, in Banfield now, the technicians get a gift certificate if they sign up so many people on the plans. What is this? This is supposed to be a hospital in medicine, and they're giving gift certificates to push people to sign them up on their plans. That's not medicine, you know. These coupons, it's crazy stuff. I mean, we're talking about medicine here. We're not talking about, you know, some sale on a coat, you know. But this is, so yes, they went after us, and ultimately they knocked us all off. But
well, they ended up arresting you.
They ended up arresting me. I mean, psych ward. They sent police to my house. I could go on and on. I mean, they just unloaded, thinking, well, this will stop them, and this will stop them, and this will stop them. But you know what? It ain't stopping me, because I've taken their best shots and I'm still standing. And now it's time for me to take my best shot. And we're doing that now while you and I are talking, you know?
And so that led you ultimately to the fight that you're having now. And we see this here in my area. All of our clinics, and I'm exaggerating when I say all, many of our clinics have been purchased by a VCA, which is a Mars corporation, and we had never heard them before, and they don't run under the Veterinary Clinics of America, they run under VCA. And so because we're Canadian, they're trying to not show that it's an American big organization, I think is what it is. Right. It's a marketing thing. Sure. And so I think that people don't understand the difference between walking into a clinic that's owned by the vet, and when he makes a mistake, the BCVMA can say to him, your whole clinic is at risk, as opposed to where the corporation comes in, they own the organization, the vet is an employee, and if you chastise the vet, they just replace him with another one and continue down their merry way. Why are the medical associations, veterinary medical associations, essentially castrating themselves?
Well, you know, unfortunately, you know, Neil, the love of money is the thing. And these people, they're walking in with millions and billions, and they're sponsoring things and they're paying for things. And I mean, oftentimes here in the US, you see a guy who's a dean of a veterinary school retire, and next thing he's on the board of Mars. Well, there was a relationship already there, you know, and that's the corruption that we talk about, you know, and that's what it's really about, is selling out at many levels. And you're absolutely right. I have had I've had several Canadians fly or drive to my house to be an expert witness because of issues they've had at a VCA hospital, you know. So because there are a few veterinarians who would stand up and, you know, defend people who've had these issues in these hospitals. But you know, the thing is that in VCA, it's in flux now, because now, you know, this is what I'm saying. I saw what happened at my place, meaning when they took over and people started leaving and the rules started changing and the quotas started coming and all this type stuff. And the same thing is happening within VCA. It's funny, I go to a meeting and I talk to somebody, oh yeah, I'm a manager at VCA. How long you been there? Well, how's it going with Mars? Well, things haven't changed too much yet, but it's happening, you know, because ultimately they're interested in one thing and one thing only: profits. That's it.
Right. Well, as a big, you know, corporation, worldwide corporation, their only responsibility is a fiduciary one to the shareholder.
Yeah. You know, I think, first of all, I don't think corporations should be allowed to own veterinary hospitals.
Agreed.
Period. I think veterinarians should own veterinary hospitals. And I think, like you said, because just what you stated it so well, they're responsible to fiduciary, profits. And that's not the formula you want when you're dealing with sick animals, but I think it's up to the people, right? The Canadians, the French people, the English people, the American people, we're all pet lovers, and we have to stand up and we have to demand change. We pay for all these things. When we unite, that's when we win, and that's what this movement's been about, and it's working. People are uniting, and they're educating each other, and then they're going in. But what has to happen next, see, my vision is to set up Protect the Pets hospitals. Now, veterinary students graduating from school have a place to go where they can be free from all those things that they really don't want to do. But if they don't have any choice, then they do it, And so veterinarians have to have a place to go, and then pet owners have to have a choice. But if they know the difference, then they'll choose the right. But we have to give them that. So there's a lot of layers to this, and it's going to happen in the time frame that it happens. But there's a big vision going on here.
And there really are a lot of layers. I mean, because you said, we started out and you were saying how you were being interviewed by the AVMA recently, and that was a real milestone. But I think that when you're talking about why people aren't taking some of the advice they're getting from vets now, the profession has a real trust issue right now.
Absolutely. It's funny because 3 years ago, I read my journals, and the AVMA president says to, the AVMA constituent, in other words, the veterinarians, why do you think we've lost our luster? Why do you think, where veterinarians were once like, they've got to be good because they love animals.
Yep.
And the car salesman was, the bad guy or the lawyer, right? And now we've lowered quite a few notches. And he was asking, why do you think this is? Because we're aware that it's happening. He said, write me. Well, I took his email address, his phone number, and I put it on the Facebook and said, people, this guy wants to know why you don't care or, about veterinarians anymore in terms of their stature. And that's who he should be asking, not the veterinarians, because they're all the ones that are sold out doing the thing. But he got blasted. You know what I'm saying? He got so many responses, but was he really interested in the answer? You know what I'm saying? You can ask the question, but if you don't ask the question, if you've got a friend who knows nothing about a subject and you go to him to ask him the answer, then you don't really want the answer, okay? You go to the people and ask them. They'll give you the answer. And it's because of issues like over-vaccination. And I think that's the biggest one. That's why I've really hit it head on, because this is mandated. In England, it's mandated they get the lepto vaccine, and that's killing pets right and left. And, and then, 15% of the income at most veterinary hospitals right off the bat is vaccines, and it's easy money. It's a big problem. And it's really, the real problem here is, the income at my hospital is 0.5% from vaccine. And that's the appropriate amount. 15% is 15% over the top, because I am vaccinating puppies and cats, kittens against these diseases appropriately and then titering. So now my titer income is 5%. Their titer income is 0.1%. You see? So, but that's the flux we're in, and it's going up. The titers are going up. Kansas State is doing more and more. So we are getting there. And that's the thing I keep telling people, like you said, take a step. Take a step. We make breakthrough in a state this year, and actually this month in the United States, where the titer will be accepted in lieu of vaccination. I've kept it a little quiet because, we break through in this state, and we've already made it through the House. So the Senate vote is looming. We break through here, you're going to see this whole facade come down, because then it's going to be common knowledge, titer equals immunity. Why are we doing this?
Perfect. I mean, if it's good enough for us, come on.
It's so simple that it's mind-blowing that they've been able to keep this the way it is for so long, really. When all veterinarians titer themselves and would never give a vaccine. Dr. Wellborn, when I was being attacked by Mars, and I was, you know, they were taking my hospital. I was countersuing them. I'm in federal court. They hired Dr. Wellborn, who at the time was the president of AHA, the American Animal Hospital Society, and also the head of the vaccine task force. So they paid him, I don't know, $15,000 to come in for 3 days and tell him that I was going to, you know, cause rabies to take over the world, you know. And I asked him a question. He got on the stand. I said, Dr. Wellborn, you give yourself a rabies shot every 3 years to protect? Oh, no, I don't do that. Why? Because I don't want to get sick. Oh, you don't want to get sick, but you go in the exam room? I said, what do you do for yourself? He goes, I check a titer. Oh, so if your titer's good, you know you're okay, right? Yes. Okay. But you go in the exam room and shoot the animals up every 3 years. He goes, it's the law. Yeah, but you're in a position to change the law. Why aren't you doing something? What about your oath?
Yep.
What about your oath when you're doing harm to pets because there's a bad law, but you're going to do it? Your oath, you know, if somebody passes a bad law, then you give up your oath and you kill your patients? And then the judge said, I got it, Dr. Robb, I got it. She knew, you know, don't beat them up anymore, you know. But anyway, but that's the deal. I mean, it's simple, really, you know.
And so let me ask you your opinion, just because I've listened to a bunch of your stuff, and I really love the way you attack a subject. And so what do you think about big pet food and veterinarians and the way that they work together now? Because when I opened my store, everybody told me I had to sell kibble or I wouldn't be successful. And I suspect that every time a young veterinarian comes out of the university and they're ready to gung-ho to do their own thing, they're told that they can't start their practice without selling kibble.
Well, you know, in most hospitals, you walk in and the displays are right there in the reception area. There's more displays of kibble than there are chairs in the reception area, you know, and all the companies are glad to give them the shelves free to put it up there. So you're absolutely right. I mean, let's face it, these companies are giving freebies to the students, right? So they hook them in vet school, and then when they get out, now I will say this: there's a place for some prescription diets. I believe that, okay? But just like the vaccines, it's overdone. There's not a prescription food for every disease modality. And then when you get somebody like Mars who owns them, and they're more interested in profits, they're not going to be doing the right research and using the best products to produce those diets. They're going to look to cut costs and do as little research and just promote the heck out of it with marketing that it's the best thing in the world. So you're absolutely right. Dogs' foods do not belong. It'd be like if you go to a human hospital and you walk in and they're selling all these foods. How does that belong in a hospital? You know, it doesn't. So I agree with you.
I would say, I would correct you on one point.
Go ahead.
They're not really foods. And I mean that because they have 50 ingredients.
Right.
And so foods generally, I would consider that either a convenience food or a fast food, but not a healthy food.
And that's basically one of the things you're up against when you just said that is, can people want, you know, the world is in such a rush. They want to take a scoop, throw it in the dish and get out the door. And that's why they get away with it. But no, there's a similar store. I'm sure it's very similar to your store that's in Newtown, Connecticut. It's called Your Healthy Pet. And I just I said, listen, do yourself a favor. Somebody comes over with a puppy kit, go over there. You know, when I have my open house, if you were next door to me, Neil, I would have had you in to have a table there and to teach people about nutrition. You see what I'm saying? So you're right. I've been indoctrinated and I'm slowly coming out of it. And I, you know, have concentrated more on medicine. So, you know, I mean, I see sick animals all day. I mean, that's what I do.
You see the worst case?
Cancer in the abdomen, you know, surgeries, ruptured ligaments, you know, just, you know, vomiting and diarrhea, and some are food related, of course. Especially treats like, I mean, you know, the worst one here is, I forget the name of it, but it, you know, they come in with pancreatitis. Did he get this treat? Yes. There you go. So they're just feeding him bacon, you know what I mean? And they end up sick, you know, the bully sticks, you probably heard of those. But anyway, you know, so you're absolutely right. And in nutrition, because again, the schools schools are indoctrinated, so they're not going to listen to you, and they're not going to teach what you know. And so that means that you have to lead, you know, unfortunately, you have to lead. And so I send people your way, you know, and I agree with you.
So what changed my mind about Kibble was a fact that Rodney Habib actually brought to me, was that dogs die of cancer more than every other mammal on the planet.
You see a lot of cancer.
And he has the study to show that's as reliable a fact as we can have today. And I'm thinking, well, what do we all do with our dogs? Well, we all feed, like 98% of us feed them kibble.
Right. No, you're right.
And that's what, minimum 60% carbohydrate for it to be in a cookie form. And they're not really, and I think they're not really carbohydrate eaters. They don't have a lot of amylase as a digestive enzyme. And so and that's what, we had a sick dog. That's what started us, was that whole process. And I came out of a software background. And so I'm a step-by-step thinker. And so that's how I came to that conclusion. And that's why we don't sell it, because ultimately we just think it's broken now. It might be better in the past, but it's not now. And my one retort against the prescribable one, ingredients, because I would always recommend, for instance, in my store today, I had a person who has a dog who's nearing the end of life. They just want to keep it happy and eating. It is refusing food, which means that at that point, he's at that point where if you can't get food into him, you know the end of life is coming.
Right.
I wouldn't recommend raw for that dog. I would never recommend raw, but I would never recommend kibble either. So we have a cooked food, a grain-free cooked food. That's a fantastic, and it offers more. And with those prescribable diets, what's the prescription in the diet? There's no ingredients that are medical in nature. They're the same ingredient deck for the most part, except for potentially cellulose, as the regular kibble. And so the only thing I would ask is, okay, I'll consider your prescription diet. What's the prescribable ingredient that I'm giving?
Right.
If they don't have one, then I will go back to fresh foods, because fresh foods make more sense to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, you know, home cooking is a big thing too. You know, if people will take the time to, you know, put together the proper diet, you know, so that's, so when they come into me, you know, I give them all their options. You know, there's some foods, you probably heard of some of them. I think one's Country Kitchen. No, not Country Kitchen.
There's an explosion.
What's that?
There's an explosion of because of the interest, and especially with younger people now.
Yes.
They're really driving this from my store. I can see it's the people between, 20 and 35 who are driving this change. It is not people in my age in their 50s to 70s. That is not those people. It is the people.
No, you're right. You're right. Dr. Harvey's. Have you heard of that one? Dr.
Yep.
Harvey's? Yeah. So now he's a doctor. He's been doing it since 1982, so there you go. One of the challenges is to get the prices down a little bit on some of these diets. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. Yep. I pull out one of his bags and it's, 16 pounds for $70, and I got a, 100-pound Malamute in the room, and it ain't happening. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I mean, so that's one of the challenges,
And that's where I would say there's still room for fresh food, but maybe you just can't economically afford to feed only fresh food.
Right.
Because some fresh food will lower those indicators of inflammation than none.
I like that. I like what you're saying. That even just gave me a little bit of more information to share with my clients in terms of, well, you don't have to feed all this, but get a percentage in there, and that helps. Good point, Neil. Very good point.
You know what? Thank you. And so, because I honestly, I've been watching your stuff for I don't know, 3 to 5 years, somewhere in there, since you came on my radar. And I got to say, you're doing great work Dr. Robb,
Yeah,
I can't, how can people, because I'm in Canada, I'm quite remote from you. How
right.
can my audience, as small or big as it is, it's not, we don't have a big audience, but you know what?
Right.
We have an audience and we
Right.
have a community that we serve, and how can they help you in your fight for responsible vaccinations?
Right. Well, like you said, every step counts. And of course, small communities with the World Wide Web are not disconnected anymore, and that's the key, So, um, I purposely try to stay on the vaccine topic just because, there are a lot of great vets, again, from your neck of the woods, Dr. Karen Becker, and
One of
she's
our
awesome,
favorites. One of our favorites.
so, but she touches every subject, and that's good. But I purposely have stayed with this one subject until it's done. You know what I mean? I
Good.
just, and so the way they can do that is just by talking to other pet owners. And when they go to their veterinary hospital, they should say to their veterinarian, I would like to get a titer for my dog. I would like to know if my dog has immunity before we vaccinate it again. That's what I'd like to do. And if you can't give me a reasonable price, I would like you to draw the blood, and I'll send it to Dr. Robb. So there you go. So and like I said, I think I've probably done 700 or 800 titers for Canadians in the last 5 years. That's a lot, 3 or 4 a week, and they have
And
to do a little extra because they've got to use Canada Post or another method to send it. But again, you don't have to refrigerate this serum to send it. That's another thing. And it can last up to 6 months. So it's heat stable, okay? This idea, you got to pack it with ice and you got to get it there overnight, it's not true,
oh,
okay? And
good.
I've done both methods and had the titers be the same. I've taken samples and held them outside for 6 months and ran it again and had the same titer. So I'm not speaking from just thinking about it. I'm speaking from experience. And so there's a lot of things that we can do, but that's what I would say. Titer test your dog, and then don't vaccinate if it's got immunity. It's pretty simple, but they've got to teach other pet owners about it. And all the science is on my website. So if they, if they go there, I mean, I've really researched it and put a lot of articles up there that are make very strong conclusions. And you can bring that to your veterinarian and say, here's the science. And if they won't read it, then that tells you got an issue there because they're not open-minded. And then you get the fear tactics, and you see a lot of that.
Well, the shame sales, where they shame
Right.
you.
That's right.
It's amazing that sales tactic is ever taken in a medical organization.
It's a real shame. It's I mean, pet owners are literally predatorized in those situations, and it's really very sad. I mean, I have a lady who just drove from Massachusetts to me. She's about 3 hours from my practice because she's got a 15-year-old dog who needs a medical workup, but no one will see her unless she gives that dog a rabies shot, and she's in her early 70s and she's driving 3 hours to get to me. And it's ridiculous. And the dog, when we did the medical workup, it's got kidney issues. I mean, it's got inflammation in its body. There's problems, and you can't give that dog a rabies shot. But she can't find any vet that will do it they're saying to her, "You would expose my staff to rabies? What are you talking about? This is a 16-year-old dog that doesn't even hit the street, and it's already had 5 rabies shots. What are you talking about?"
And it's asymptomatic.
And it's asymptomatic, yeah. And this old lady at 72 is exposing his staff to rabies. I mean, this is crazy stuff, that we're saying to these people. And it's horrendous. It really is,
And so on your website, that's one of the points I want to make, and you actually did make it, is you have tons of fantastic resources.
Yeah,
you have letters already pre-written for the vet to write up and say, these are the negative consequences of one of the vaccines I gave, so that they can do the reporting that needs to be done. That's probably right. Not appropriately being done now. That you have all sorts of great information there for the pet owner as well as for the vet.
And that information is, I mean, I've done a lot of it, but I've had a lot of help from other people. I mean, this is a combined effort. That website was created, 2 individuals, Carrie Morganson and Patty Coyne, really worked hard, countless hours, no pay, to help. Okay, how do we get more people to report reactions? How do we petition veterinarians? And they've come up with all these things that are easy for people to use. So we've done a lot of the work that people can just go there and find their niche and do something about it. So you're right, there's a lot of resources if they will go to that website. We're still updating it, you know, so we're going to stay in this till we get it done. And, you know, you're seeing a new standard come out of it. And of course, with the food too, it's time to turn back the clock, you know, and get back to sensible feeding as well as appropriate vaccination. I would agree with you on that.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Dr. Robb. It's been fantastic. And one of the ones I'd recommend you check out is Dr. Ian Billinghurst's Pointing the Bone at Cancer. He's a veterinarian from Australia. He's considered one of the fathers of fresh feeding. And he wrote a book back in the 80s about it. And that started a lot of the people on the journey to finding fresh foods for their pets. But his Pointing the Bone at Cancer, he actually quit the veterinary practice for a long time so that he could focus on this book. And it's about mammals. It's not just about dogs and cats. And he goes through the whole history of cancer to where we are today, to what the actual, because he believes it's primarily a dietary disease.
I have to agree with you. You know, it's funny that when Rodney Habib put together that very powerful video when I was testifying, you know, there was a doctor there in the human field that was testifying in front of the public health, and he said, you know, the problem in the United States is that, you know, people now are so sold that they just want to go to the doctor and they want to get a pill for everything.
Yep.
But they're not eating properly and they're not exercising properly. And so it's really a sad state of affairs. So it's exactly what you're talking about. And he was making the same argument in terms of the human market, that people need to be led correctly to eat appropriately as a big part of the health. And of course it's obvious, right? You are what you eat, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's the fuel.
It's the fuel. Yeah.
You put diesel in a gas car, it's not going to run. Or it might, but not for long.
And people suffer tremendously, because I tell you one thing that I don't like it when I'm sick, you know. I mean, all the wheels stop, you know. It's a terrible situation. So I want to do everything I can to stay healthy. And I have a wonderful Polish wife who makes me great food all the time. Fresh food, you know.
You're a lucky man.
Yeah, I really am. I'm a blessed man. And then I chop wood. So I heat my house here in Connecticut with wood, but I have a wood furnace in the yard. So, you know, I'm out there every weekend, you know, but I just use the chainsaw and then I split. I don't have a splitter, but I just split. And it's hard work. But you know what? I heat my house and I keep in shape. And it's gonna keep me on this earth for a little while longer.
Well, and the dogs help keep me healthy every day. I have to get out because the dogs have to get out.
They got to get walked. Absolutely.
I'm healthier for having them.
Yeah, but so, it's pretty cold up there in Canada, right?
I'm actually in the most mild climate of Canada, in Victoria, British Columbia. We're on Vancouver Island in the Pacific. And so I actually don't have winter, but we get rain.
Okay.
And so
like California, yeah.
Yeah, we're the California of Canada, but we're considered a temperate rainforest. And so I get 3 to 4 months of rain, and then we have lovely weather, and then we go back to 3 to 4 months of rain. If we get winter, and we don't every year, we'll have it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Wow, that sounds pretty good.
It's not so bad. It's not so bad. And if you're ever up to the Northwest, plan a 90-minute ferry ride from Seattle and come and visit me.
I might take you up on that one day, Neil, once things calm down a little bit.
Well, you know, it never will calm down. The world keeps turning. When you find some time for yourself, Dr. Robb, I'd love to meet you. But if hopefully I'll meet you at one of these conferences or one of these things that we go to occasionally. And I just want to thank you so much for your time today. And I just want to let people know, go to protectthepets.com. Dr. Robb's website is exceptional. And there's lots of resources there for both you and your vet to learn more about responsible vaccination.
Thank you, Neil. It's been wonderful having you on your show. And obviously, go see Neil. He'll teach you how to feed your pets. How's that?
Perfect. Have a good day, sir.
You too, Neil. Take